History is often muddled by myth, and tanks are no exception. Misinformation comes from a variety of places, whether it be old TV documentaries, propaganda, outdated books, or internet forums. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a few to see just how accurate they are. Let's start with an internet classic, a light armored car taking out a heavy tank at the Battle of Saint Vith. The story goes like this. An M8 Greyhound was waiting in a camouflage position. A Tiger II happens to drive by, so the M8 begins to pursue. The Tiger notices the Greyhound, but it's too late. At point blank range, the M8 puts 3 rounds in the Tiger's engine, killing it. This tale is dubious for a few reasons. First, the report doesn't clarify what tank was killed in the first place. It just says Tiger. People hypothesize it was a Tiger II because there weren't any Tiger Is in the area. Second, it's very possible the tank was misidentified. Panzer IVs were often mistaken for Tigers in the European theater, and that would explain why the M8 was able to penetrate the tank in the first place. Rumors of Tigers being in the area circulated prior, so that likely increased the chance of mistaken identity. Third, there's little evidence to corroborate what happened. The details come from a single eyewitness account. It's safe to say the Greyhound killed some kind of tank, but anyone claiming to know exactly what tank is lying. Next up is a myth that only started cropping up somewhat recently. Many believe that Germany pioneered the use of night vision on tanks during World War II, with the Panther being the first tank to use such devices. Towards the end of the war, a few Panther Gs were fitted with night fighting equipment, but they weren't the first. It was actually the Soviets, who mounted infrared optics on tanks as early as 1941. The first tanks to receive them were likely BT-7s. The US also beat the Germans to the punch on this one, creating an M4 Sherman with infrared lights in mid-1942. I imagine someone in the comments will argue the Germans were the first to use them in combat, but that would also be incorrect. T-34s went into combat with these devices in late 1942. I think this myth comes from War Thunder. The Panther II was one of the only tanks to have visible night vision equipment, and it was by far the oldest. So I think people kinda just assumed the Panther was the first. Moving on. For being on such a niche topic, this next one is surprisingly prevalent, and it's one I've been guilty of spreading before. Many people believe that the XM274 cannon, which was used on the HIMAG, HSTVL, RDFLT, and several other vehicles, was supposed to degrade enemy armor. The idea is that using its high rate of fire, it would fire bursts through the same section of armor, degrading it to the point that it failed. As far as I can tell, this is false. There's only one place I could find such a claim, and it's presented as a hypothetical that they will be testing, not the cannon's main function. The book the claim is in is also unknown, so the veracity of the information is up for debate. The cannon's high rate of fire had 2 main purposes. 1. By firing a burst, you drastically increase the probability of a lethal hit. 2. The army was worried the Soviets would come in such great numbers that a conventional tank gun would be too slow. The cannon was supposed to penetrate on the first shot, not just for tanks like the T-62, T-64, and T-72, but future armor threats as well. Penetration surpassed that of the 105 used by the M1, but it was cancelled for a few reasons. Growth potential was limited, and the ammo was expensive to produce. The idea of armor degradation probably wouldn't have worked that well in combat either. On a T-64A, its composite armor wasn't great at handling multiple hits, but after that, the durability of Soviet composite increased greatly. And finally, a lot of people are confused about how shaped charges or heat rounds function. Many think that when the shaped charge goes off, it creates a molten jet so hot that it physically melts or burns through the armor. This is likely because heat's called a chemical effect round, as opposed to kinetic rounds. The penetrative effect of a heat round is still kinetic, it's just that when compared to APF-SDS, it's executed far differently. When the shaped charge goes off, the warhead's lining is turned into a plasticized jet, which moves at incredible speed, about 10 kilometers per second. For context, most APF-SDS rounds are in the range of 1.4 to 1.8 kilometers per second. When the jet strikes the armor, it penetrates in the same way that conventional AP rounds do. The jet is far from molten. Most shaped charges use a copper liner, and copper's melting point is a little over 1000 degrees Celsius. The jet's temperature is around half that. And since steel's melting point is even higher than copper's, it's safe to assume it doesn't melt through the armor. It's so pervasive that, even though I'd already explained this in an earlier video, I recently slipped up and said molten copper jet in my video on the TV8. And that wraps everything up. I enjoy making this style of video, so leave any misconceptions you want me to cover in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.